Hi everybody. Today I want to talk to you about DDD in startups, and particular DDD in my startup, Pink Tie. I founded it about 5 years ago with 2 friends, and our initial ambition was to conquer the European market for online ticket sales. I think by early estimates of our business plans, I should have been a millionaire about now. I guess that's a drop in the bucket for no estimates. The nature of our product, selling tickets on behalf of people, got us interested in event sourcing very early on. And obviously, when you learn about event sourcing, it's very difficult not to learn about DDD. So today, I'd like to talk to you about our experiences at Pink Tie with applying domain-driven design in a startup with various degrees of success. We've had projects that, completely failed on us because we went about it wrongly. And we've also had moments where it was really critical driver in actually, making the next step and being able to deliver a high-quality product faster and better than our competitors. So it contains the gory details of doing this stuff. So what can you expect? It's a real story about a real domain. And with that, I hope to set sort of an example that we are all more open about our domains in which we work. Because I think, we're at a conference here. You can't really do domain-driven design and try to learn about it if you're not open about what the challenges are that you face. Now, I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. We've been doing domain-driven design for about 5 years, and we are never really completely satisfied. We haven't seen the rainbows and unicorns that everybody thinks of when you learn about new techniques. But then again, I also can't imagine how difficult things would have been for us if we would have gone for a more traditional software development approach. So expect a soft talk, and also expect maybe some heavy emotions from me, because this is sort of like therapy, since I'm in a startup and can't really afford a therapist. So I have some assumptions. I assume you've read this book. Who has? I assume you have a growth mindset. You want to learn. You think you can always improve. I assume you know event sourcing and CQRS and test-driven design and behavior-driven development, at least in theory. And that just like me, you find it difficult to apply these things on a daily basis. So this is us, three friends, 5 years ago, young and foolish, wanting to start a business. So what does Pink Tie do? We help theaters and event organizers make money by selling their tickets. So how does this work? Well, basically, they tell us who they are, we verify that, and from that moment onwards, we basically act on their behalf. And this means that we, collect their money, we sell their tickets, we provide their customers with the support they need. So basically, we take away the entire process. If we look right now at all the customers that we have, what sets us apart from the competition, it's that we're really able to simplify a complex product offering for ticket buyers. But how do we get there? What was the original idea and how did we productize this? So originally, we got the idea of starting this business because we were consumers ourselves that would purchase tickets quite often, and we would be frustrated with the process. In 2010, 2011, if you would buy a ticket to an event, you would be facing high service fees. Systems would not be available at critical moments, especially for events that would be very popular. If you would have a new spiffy iPhone, it would definitely not be a nice experience because none of this stuff was designed for mobile. You would be asked to fill in a vast amount of data and preferably also create an account. And then by the time you would have created an account, the system would have forgotten what your original order was. So we saw a lot of room for improvement. So what we did is we took this original frustration and participated in a business plan competition. And I don't know if any of you know what they do there, but basically they encourage you to dream big, bigger, biggest. So besides this original idea of, okay, let's just take away all the frustration and make sure that buying a ticket is nice again, we started to think about, okay, but online ticket sales, that took away the whole experience of having a ticket for an event which you can put on a corkboard in your room to remind you every time of that nice evening that you had. So we wanted to become more of a platform to facilitate that. And we also wanted to do a lot with the information that is shown by your purchase behavior, because you can say on Facebook or whatever social media platform that you want to go to an event, but what says most about your experience is the fact that you actually bought a ticket. So we saw a lot of opportunities there, and this is what we sort of build out within this business plan competition. What we also realized is that our product is really critical to the success or failure of our customer. If we fail, they will not be able to sell tickets. Now, we had some initial contacts in the event industry here in Amsterdam. So we thought, we can contact these people with a very successful festival or with a very popular event, but we can't fail. So we must get the first version of the product perfect, because that's how software works, right? So that was, something that just to set the stage, basically. Lastly, I was the only person in the team that had experience in building software and in a little bit in building more product-oriented software. But my prior experiences gave me a certain sense of how you should do this, and it led me to believe that perfection is very important. So all in all, we have an idea, we have a little bit of an inexperienced team, the idea got bigger, and now we're going to start. So what are we doing? Well, we got interested in domain-driven design, so we're learning about that. The book obviously encourages us to discover the domain, so that's what we try to do. So, we formulate a domain vision statement. Who of you here knows what it is, by the way? Let's start with that. Okay, I don't see a lot of hands. So, or in general. Oh, no, in general. So, in a domain vision statement, you can sort of set the horizon, the vision that you have for the domain. The problems it will solve with and what's the models that you will use for it. So I'm going to share one of the early ones from us. I'll shut up, you can read it. So as you see, the bold words are basically domain terms. There's some intent there. This seems to resemble a ubiquitous language, and it seems to go about tickets. So we thought we were on the right track. And to be honest, this was actually part of one A4 sheet of paper. This is just one paragraph. There were 3 more. So this was basically, our first vision that we had. So we learned that it was important to identify boundaries. So that's what we did, and we tried to enforce them. We have stuff about analytics. There's a part there where we collect payments. We do ticket sales. There's pre-sale promotion. There's a lot going on, and we have a domain model. And we try to practice model-driven design. So not only do we take time to, experiment with ideas and to explore boundaries and together with the team, sketch stuff out on a whiteboard, But also, we take this and we go back to the code, and we try to implement it, and we go back to the model again. I mean, I have Dropbox folders filled with like pictures from brainstorming sessions, and we have about 10 GitHub repos full of code probes, attempts to solve the problem in a certain way. And what does that look like? Well, we have aggregates and we have value objects. So everything seems to be like we're doing the right thing. So like I said, we were interested in event sourcing due to the nature of the product. If you collect money on behalf of others, it makes me sleep well at night that you have a provable audit log. And I'm sure most of you can understand this. And these events, they resemble the domain. And obviously, when you do event sourcing, CQRS is in most cases a must. So we had a command model and read models. And lastly, we tried to focus, even though that was very difficult. Everything that we couldn't do, but that we thought of, we would put in a backlog, which obviously kept growing and growing and growing. So what were we really doing? Well, we were inventing the wheel a lot because we were programming in PHP, because that's what I knew, and we thought it was cheap to source people. But in PHP, there was no event sourcing framework, and there were no libraries for doing CQRS or messaging. So all of this stuff we had to write ourselves. And obviously, because we became a payment service provider, because we became a payment service provider, we had to comply with the latest rules of processing payments. So all of the libraries that we could use for payments were not really fitting to our needs. So we had to invent those. We were growing our team, but we were doing this with no money because the company that we founded was bootstrapped. We financed everything ourselves with working on the side, student loans, begging, borrowing, and stealing. But yeah, we were growing our team with basically, interns, so more inexperienced people. And obviously, you're living your life. I mean, in the past 5 years, the mother of one of my founders died. I got married, I became a father, relationships stop. There's things happening outside of, the work that you do. And there was a whole lot more, because business is more than just building software. So what's the issue with this? Well, what are the constraints of a startup? It's, what's your guess? Anyone? No one.
Lots of ideas, no money.
Exactly. Well, a little bit more. Money, power, and time. So at some point we're thinking, like, what are we doing? Because we have a process, but and we try to have a process that is helping us get stuff done, but it feels like waterfall. And, we're doing CQRS, and that's supposed to help us, but eventual consistency is really hard. And we're doing event sourcing, which is supposed to make, changing the system really easy. But now we realize that our events are wrong, or our aggregate boundaries are wrong. And all of a sudden, this stuff becomes very difficult. And we have bounded context, but, sometimes we just want to make a sprint so that we have something to show to each other. So, maybe some of them are leaking. All in all, everything is there, aggregates, tests, specifications, value objects, but it doesn't feel right. DDD is everywhere. I don't know if you can read this, but this is an event that we had in one of the earlier prototypes. It's from our legal bounded context. General admissions agreement accepted. I mean, this is like, we could not have been more reckless with our time and money than this. And we were going after the wrong ubiquitous language, We had this feeling that we should model ticket sales, as you would maybe know them from buying tickets in real life. So we modeled things after a box office, the little office at the cinema or at the theater where you would go and you would, give somebody money and they would give you a ticket back. And that led us in complete wrong direction. We had incorrect boundaries. at all levels. This is an example from aggregates. Here we have basically one command handler that's persisting two aggregates, which says something about our transaction boundary. And one of the more important ones, our domain vision was completely wrong. I mean, what I showed you earlier, it looks like a vision. There is a ubiquitous language, and some of it has merit. The problem with it, however, is that, this is way too abstract. We are about selling tickets, and we do that on behalf of an event organizer, and other people are buying tickets, and it's not shown anywhere in there. And the problem with that is that it leads you into a direction of abstraction that is, not fitting to your business, and it can lead to intent that is, not the behavior that your system should have. So this was all in all not helpful at all. And lastly, we had no agility. Like, this is a year later, me finally understanding how it works. So the general feeling was, we're applying all the patterns, but it isn't working. And that's, when you're a bootstrap startup, it is your own money. This creates a very binary feeling. Tom Janssens tweeted about this a year ago. It's literally like this. One day you feel the king of the world, and the other, it's you don't see the forest for the trees. So why was all of this happening? Well, our biggest mistake was that we didn't have any domain expertise. We were maybe domain experts in the part of purchasing, but in the end of the day, who is our customer? Our customer is the event organizer, and we had no understanding of what their needs were. So this led us to build a system that was not aimed at solving their problem. We had a lack of focus on the core domain. We didn't really understand what the most important part was. Was it the payments? Was it the selling? Was it maybe the recommending stuff? We had too much making and too little faking. If you are already unsure of what you're doing and you then start to build everything pitch perfect, you know how much time and money you can waste? And we had a poor understanding of agile processes in an inexperienced team. And it led to not launching for 2 years. Yeah. So we went a bit black there. Like, what do? So we took out a loan. And we hired an expensive consultant. And he helped us focus a lot. Mostly on processes, basically. So, thinking of, like, what should we build so that we got more to the core domain. He helped us, instead of starting again and again and again, to better refactor. We had a better process for building, keeping track of what we were doing with Kanban. And he was, also encouraging us to not do everything all at once. When you're building a product, there's a happy path. A ticket buyer buys a ticket. But there's a lot of other things that can happen. Maybe that person gets sick and wants to exchange that ticket, or maybe the event gets canceled, or maybe the location changes. Now, all of these things can happen, but if you, right from the get-go, try to implement all that behavior, it can take an awful long time before you're actually ready. But if you just do the happy path, schedule an event, start a ticket sale, sell tickets, buy tickets, send the tickets out, then it is a lot. Your feedback loop to the market is going to be a lot quicker. It made us really realize that we're doing all this design not for like the exercise of it, but more because it will help us do a better job. So when we were working together with this consultant, an opportunity arose. This is a theater here in town. It's called Toomler. It's actually rather famous in the Netherlands. A lot of the famous Dutch comedians have started their careers there. And they gave us a chance to become their first-party ticket seller. So now all of a sudden we had a domain expert, people that we could ask questions like, why do you do it like this? And what do you need? But it also meant we were kind of pivoting because our original product was really aimed at events that would happen a few times per year, but a theater is an entirely different business. They sell tickets for shows multiple times a day sometimes, multiple shows per week. They have an entire different need. But that also opened opportunities because by now we did have a good core domain model for selling tickets, and it became actually pretty easy to add tailor-made functionality that fit right to their needs. So we built generic functionality for theaters that was addressing their problems, but in addition to that, we listened really well to these customers and asked them, okay, but how are you doing business so far without an online ticket system? And we were basically able to adapt to all their existing business processes. Now, because we did a great job back then, we now have a contract with Amsterdam, and we do a lot of different projects with them. And this was really a moment where things started changing around, because due to the fact that we had a good core domain model, and due to the fact that we had events that were mimicking the real use cases of the domain of ticket sales, it was very easy for us to add new functionality for these particular customers. And we were able to do that faster than a competing company, which just raised 1 million euros. So what's my goal with telling all of this today to you? I want to tell you that domain-driven design isn't necessarily about doing everything perfect, to me at least. It is about achieving your best results because you focus your attention where it's going to yield the most. And DDD, in that sense, is not that hard. It's doing DDD wrong, which is hard. So looking back on this little endeavor of us, we sort of saw that there is this model of DDD in startups. It's basically what we see is that there's cost, there's traps, there's tools, and there's benefits that can help you achieve the best results. So I'm now going to go forward to share some of the issues that we encountered or things where we took wrong decisions. And I'll give some advice, some words of warning, and also some words of encouragement. Now, most of this applies outside of the startup context as well. It's just that because in a startup you have limited resources, these things will be more, they will amplify success or failure a lot more. And also would like to say that the success or failures that we had were not necessarily uniquely attributable to DDD, but getting it wrong will definitely make the effects worse. So if there's one thing, one word of warning that I could give you, it would be this, do you know your problem really well? Because in our case, we thought we did. We thought we knew the problem, frustrating, buying a ticket is annoying. But it's wrong, because in our case, the problem owner wasn't the customer. And therefore, we set out to build an entirely wrong product. And that really got amplified because we thought that DDD is all about doing stuff perfect and building this really intricate, beautiful design. But it's also about the strategic part, are you focusing on the right stuff? So this was really a word of warning that I would like to give everybody. Now, in terms of advice, you can use DDD very well to focus your efforts where they yield the most. So think about the core domain, and keep on distilling, And also, make it easy. there can only be one core domain. Don't fool yourself like we did, where we thought, well, payment processing is important and ticket selling. We always had difficulties saying which one was more. And if you have access to expertise, it's going to be a lot more easy to focus this solution, because people will tell you, this doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is this other thing. Now, my words of encouragement are, go do it. It's fun. You'll learn so much from trying this, and you may even succeed. But be smart and don't set yourself up for failure by doing, way too much all at once. So how can you do this? Knowledge crunching, lots of it, with your team, with the domain experts. Keep doing it. So about a minimum viable product. In our case, our minimum viable product really turned out to be like maximum viable, or well, it wasn't really viable because the initial versions never really launched. So dare to ask yourself the question, is this product really the most minimum thing that I could do? And is it really viable? Here again, maybe it sounds repetitive, but you have to focus on the core domain. And you can set yourself up for success by really choosing for a model-driven design, where you take a portion of the system, you implement some behavior that is important, and then you iterate. And when you do so, be bold and do less, because there's so much you can do, but it's even more important that you just start with doing the most important things. And here, your domain expert will be of help. Just do the happy path and see what works and see what doesn't. Because if you're a small team, it is not difficult to support your customers when things go wrong. It is actually relatively easy if you do continuous delivery or something like of the sorts to adapt to these emerging requirements quickly. So experimenting. We did quite some experiments, but we started with experimenting way too late. I think the first 3 years we were just doing one thing, and that's stupid because even the book warns for this a lot. There is so much opportunity to be had in exploring different models and also to see how these things plan out in the wild. I've always regretted not experimenting, because is your first version of anything you do necessarily the best? With me, it never really is, and I never regretted to do an experiment. So use different models and also vary how you use them with alternatives. I mean, you can enable the customer to use the model in different ways, and if you share with them what the underlying model is, they'll surprise you with what kind of new and inventive ways they come up with to use it. Keep in mind that adding stuff is cheaper than changing it, and that you can fake your model as well. As long as you have a reasonable, if you have a reasonable model, it can be easy in implementation to fake a lot of it. So realism. I think this is a trap that a lot of people fall for. We want to model software, and we look at the real world, and then we go back to our code and our models, and we're like, well, this isn't how it is. But models aren't really supposed to be an exact representation of reality. And also, which model is right? Is it your model? Is it the model that the customer has? Is it somewhere in between? You should be aware that there is no single answer to that question. So just judge the models on their usefulness. Because at the end of the day, your job is to deliver a solution to the problem of your customer. So in our case, what we did wrong is that we forgot that not only do you have to be, should your models not be mimic like reality, they should also really support your own use cases. So we were never really a stakeholder in any of the features that we were building. And therefore, a lot of what we had to do was not really represented in our model all the time, because we were trying to make a realistic model of our customer's problem. And we always forgot to include ourselves in the picture. So as a suggestion, allow time in each iteration to fulfill your own needs. So I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of tailor-made solutions, and it's actually works pretty well for us to offer customers tailor-made solutions. We do that free of charge. We say, if you give us your business, we'll look at what you need, and then we'll say if we can do that. And usually these things are non-standard features, because a theater, for example, the place that where we are today, the Meervaart, is a theater, and they've been operating for years and years in a certain way. So they have, systems and ways of working that they're used to and that they would like to keep. So, integrating with that is often, a desire. And if you have events, it becomes very easy to, hook into the business process of selling a ticket, and then, integrate that with the business process of the theater itself. And the nice thing is, if you build a non-standard feature that is really tailor-made to your customer, you create some sort of positive vendor lock-in. So the advice here is, do it if it makes sense. If you can close a deal and it will be successful, will make you successful. But also make sure that you maintain your model integrity with like a bounded context, modules, separate model. And all of these things are very easy to do when you have events. I get to say microservices. So, this is what we do a lot. These custom things are basically a little microservice that listens to the events that are of relevance. And so use messaging to your advantage. Test the work outside in, so that you make sure that the behavior that they expect is good, is working. But at the end of the day, this is not your core business. So ignore the code aesthetics. Focus on just getting the work done, and it's fine if it's a microservice and it's bigger than 1,000 lines. So when building a product, it's incredibly tempting to add more features. Not only because that is how you can keep on emailing your customers with how relevant you are, but also because a lot of customers will ask you for it. And the issue with that is, if you don't revisit your model, you keep on adding and adding and adding and adding, and you accumulate a lot. So should you add more features? My default answer is always no. But when you do, make sure you refactor to a deeper model. Look again, zoom out, and take the time to review if there isn't some new concept emerging on a higher level that you would miss if you would just add this feature in a simple way. So commit to simplicity. And there's different ways of doing this, Start at the end and just work your way backwards, because that way you'll never do too much. Visualize and share with your stakeholders. And test it in the market. I mean, like testing it, showing it to people, A/B testing. So the book has an entire chapter dedicated to breakthroughs. And I think it's important to take the time to talk about that, because if you're a small team like we are, the problem with breakthroughs is they always show up like unannounced, usually with bad timing. And you can postpone them, but if you do, you create this disparity between your mental model, because you have had this breakthrough already, and your implementation. So make sure that you understand the problem well enough, and that the breakthrough that you foresee is real and probe the changes, but make sure to always really engage a breakthrough. Because if you don't, you create the disparity between model and an implementation. And before you know it, what you're doing is not really that, why you've started to do DDD is no longer benefiting. And you can facilitate these changes with tests. So, like I mentioned before, it took us a really long time to figure out that what we could do well was a complex product offering and making that simplistic. And this was really a pivot for us because, all of a sudden we were working for theaters and people that have continuous ticket sales. But my word of warning is really, if you're solving a problem, dare to be critical to yourself, like we were, and ask yourself, are you really solving the right problem? In our case, we were solving a problem that a lot of other people tried to solve, and where the only mode of competition was basically price. And when the opportunity came, we engaged it, and a new design emerged as a result of that. So be sure to engage a pivot if it makes sense, but also set yourself up for success by guiding your development with objectives and results. You want to go somewhere, make sure you have a process in place to see if you're on track. So think of in terms of budget. If I would try out this new market segment, how much would I be willing to invest in seeing if this is working, and judge if that is actually making sense from a business perspective, and how long it will take to have return on investment. So shortcuts, we took a lot of them, and I regret a lot of them. And that's not necessarily because shortcuts are bad, but because we went about it in the wrong way. We didn't really have a process in place where we would, revisit what shortcuts we took. We weren't really keeping a decent inventory of them. You would just be surprised sometimes whenever you would start on something and think like, oh yeah, I forgot. There was this madness going on here. So, whenever you take a shortcut, be sure that you have some conscience and know if you will really address this piece of technical debt later on. Debt is fine when it's managed with the process. We took a lot of shortcuts in launching critical features, and it got us as a company to the next step. I think that is quite often needed. You can't always build the best stuff and be adaptive to the changes in the market. But if you do so, like you would take out a normal loan, make sure that you manage it. Make agreements and hide the stuff behind an interface to make it also easy to change these things in the future. So, as a matter, when you look at it, we are a software as a service business, and in that sense, we have a lot of abstractions. And I mentioned earlier we had a domain vision statement, which was leading us in the wrong direction, and it was really in this area where we were fooled by our own abstractions. So, whenever you're working on your model and you're looking at it, you have to wonder, these concepts that I've introduced, are they really part of the domain, or are they something I've invented? And if they're something I invented, are they really part of the domain that is solving my problem, or are they muddying with the domain of the problem that I'm solving on behalf of my customer? So I think it's important that you make sure that those two are separate, and that you look out for the conceptual contours within the domain that you have. but also that you make the business part of your business part of the domain model. So lastly, I want to talk about our experiences with event sourcing. I also went to this conference last year. This is Greg giving his talk on event sourcing and the history of CQRS, etc. And he is saying there that CQRS and event sourcing is not a top-level architecture. And at that moment that he was saying that, I was literally getting a message that the system was going down because we were foolish enough to use CQRS and event sourcing as our top-level architecture. And then I thought it was ironic, so I tweeted about it. So the answer to this question, no, the word of warning is, well, I follow Greg's advice here. So, apply event sourcing where it makes sense. But when you do, event source whatever is critical to your success, then you can, open up this whole new world of opportunity because you can hook into your business process and therefore also the business process of your customer. And you can help them, like I said, with, for example, the exactly tailor-made stuff. You can solve their problems really well. And, just events without event sourcing are already a great way to start. So maybe you're wondering, would I do all of this again? Yes. I enjoyed the experience very much. I've learned a lot. And I would all encourage you, if you ever have a great idea, if you ever have a problem that you think needs solving, and you have a good solution for it, go for it. Try it, and maybe you'll learn from it. You'll most definitely learn from it, and maybe you'll succeed. If you have any questions, I gladly take them. Yes?
You were talking about faking your model.
Yeah.
What exactly? Could you give an example?
Hard-coded stuff, mock integrations. The model could all... You can have a model which, for example, results in a certain user interface, a certain user experience. What you could do is, mimic that in just a simple test where you check with potential customers if it's working, or you could just fake parts of the domain model itself, like I said, with maybe hard-coded solutions. Sometimes you maybe have to integrate with another system, and you know that integration is going to take a long time. Why not make a fake integration that at least has all the data in there for the next month or two? There's ways to see if the model that you have in mind will work in reality. So you can be very smart about that, and the earlier you do the faking, so like for example in user testing before you actually build something, the better. In my experience, a lot of the model influences your user experience a lot. So I think you can learn a lot already in testing with fake pages, etc. Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Oh yeah, up top.
Did you ever, in that process, took wrong decisions modeling your events, and if so, how difficult was it correcting that in terms of event sourcing, dealing with legacy events, and so on?
So the question was if we ever made wrong decisions regarding events, and how difficult it then was to correct these. We made a lot of those wrong decisions, and it was very difficult for us to address that. And it was in large part due to our inexperience. But I think when you look at it, we went about it wrong because we're doing online ticket sales, so our data is very short-lived. Somebody schedules an event, it's probably going to take place between now and 8 weeks. Within that time, we're going to sell a bunch of tickets. Then maybe afterwards there's a bit of after sales. And about 1 to 2 weeks later, we pay out the money depending on the payout schedule that customer has. So basically, we could just start, take the new model into production for the new, events in the sense like the things people buy tickets for, and just gradually phase out the old stuff. I think that's really the beauty of our domain, but we never really used that attribute, that natural attribute of the domain, to our advantage. But if I would encounter the situation now, I would. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So the question was if it's not necessary to learn, by experience from these situations. I think so. I would probably agree. It's also because in our case, our customers also are are changing. So the needs change. Our initial model is really tailored to one purchase per ticket, but if we would go to a sort of a basket setup, that might influence, our entire model incredibly. So the question, I think, is true. It's the experience that you have, both from a technical perspective, how to do these things, and also from a business perspective, how the changes in the product affect the events and the model. Yes. So the question was if what I meant with using events without event sourcing. So in event sourcing, we really use the events to rebuild the state of the system, whether that is for the aggregates or for read models. But what you could also do is, have basic entities, and whenever you would persist them, you would dispatch. You would have basic entities, and whenever you would invoke a certain command, you could dispatch, an event that would maybe get recorded. And then you already have these hooks in your business, into your business process. So as an example, let's say we weren't event sourced. When a ticket buyer would buy a ticket, when that transaction happened, I could always, record a user bought ticket. That would greatly help, build systems that can hook into that behavior. Does that answer your question? So the question was if hiring the consultant was the necessary breakthrough. I'd say so, yeah, because in this case, we were completely stuck. That was because there was one person programming this and the other two had no experience in building software. So yes, it was necessary. You need some conscience, outside of your organization that sometimes can shake you up and say, you're doing it wrong. And we had that on the business side, like we had a board of advisors, but there was no one in there that had this, this deep technical knowledge. So they weren't really able to see it either, Everybody knows that building software is not necessarily the easiest activity. So, people have a lot of patience for not showing something. I guess that was it.